Hey everybody, welcome to the Midweek 5. I hope that you're having a good week. We are into the month of May and it is hard to believe. Hey, summer is around the corner. It is coming, but let's make the most of today. So I don't know what this week has been like for you, but hopefully the next few minutes I can just give you some encouragement that may help you along the way. So this past Sunday I did a message along the lines of talking about rest. And so rest is one of those things when we start thinking about it from a spiritual standpoint or a physical standpoint. We can kind of have some different thoughts on what exactly it looks like to rest. I mean, even if you just think about the physical aspect of rest, you probably have some ways that you want to rest that might look different than how I may want to rest or anybody else. For some of us, resting involves things that don't look very restful. It's doing yard work. It's doing things that involve physical activity, yet somehow that invites a sense of rest. For others, rest may involve drinking a cup of coffee and staring out off into nature. For others, rest is perhaps watching a ball game and interacting with family, friends as you do that. So I don't know what rest looks like for you. That would be a whole nother conversation. But really, from a spiritual standpoint, I wanted to clarify and also at the same time try to encourage you this week about what grace, about what rest then allows us to do, because we are able to rest in Christ because of His grace. I stumbled and said grace a second ago, but that's where I was going with that. Because God has chosen to extend His gift of grace, and that means that God looks at us and says there are some things that you're just not going to be able to accomplish and achieve on your own. There are some things that you've messed up, and God doesn't look at us and leave us with no hope in that. He extends His grace to us, His favor to us, not because we've earned it, but because He's chosen to extend it to us. And as we receive that gift of His grace, then we are able to rest in Christ. But what does that mean spiritually to really be at rest? Well, let me give you two thoughts on what it doesn't mean, and then I'll share a quick thought with you on what I think rest actually means. And I think that will be an encouragement to you as you are trying to rest in Jesus and figure out maybe how you navigate through some of the circumstances of where God has you right now. So two quick thoughts on what it maybe doesn't mean to rest. The first one is this, is that rest is not permission to abuse grace. I think sometimes we say, well, I'm resting in Christ, and so I know God has forgiven me, so, hey, I'm going to do this, and if I mess up, hey, grace still applies, right? Well, grace is not given to us so that we can rest in Christ, but then do whatever we want. That's why Romans 6:1 says, what shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? That's not exactly how it works. And so to rest in Christ doesn't mean that we just kind of navigate through this life doing whatever we want. Actually, that brings, when we do that, that brings a greater sense of restlessness into our life. So maybe an encouragement to you today is that rest is also kind of a form of submission. It's submitting our lives to the ways of Christ. And sometimes we struggle to be at rest, struggle to really walk in the power of His grace because we're kind of abusing that grace. We're not, we want kind of the blessing of God without the surrender to Him. So that's one thing that I think rest is not. Another thing that rest is not an invitation to laziness. Listen to what is said in Proverbs. I think it's interesting. You maybe heard this before, but a lot of times I'll hear people say, "Well, you're telling me to rest and just like wait on God and be still. So that just means I do nothing." Okay, so I'm going to sit here and pray and not do anything until God basically works a miracle, a supernatural miracle, and then I'm able to step into it. And that's not exactly what I think resting in the grace of Christ means either. Look at what Proverbs 6 says, beginning in verse 6. It says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of hands to the rest, and poverty will come on you like a bandit." And so that proverb reminds us that while we rest in the grace that God has extended to us, knowing that we don't earn his love and his favor through our works, so we rest in him, there is an element of still pursuing and seeking out what it is that God has for us. But here's the thing, while rest is not an invitation to abuse grace, and rest is not an invitation to be lazy, rest is an invitation to pursue the good works that God has for us, but we pursue those with peace. So it's like we come before God and say, God, I'm going to seek out your will. So that means I'm going to open some doors. I'm going to turn over some rocks and see if there's something underneath that. I'm going to be intentional in seeking out your will. I'm not going to take a passive position, but at the same time, I'm not going to get all worried and worked up trying to work things into existence. I'm going to seek, I'm going to do my due diligence, but as I do that, I'm going to pursue that from a place of rest, from a place of being at peace because of the grace that God has extended to me. So when you think about rest this week, when you think about grace this week, I want to challenge you, don't let that go to the extreme where we abuse that grace and the rest that we have in Christ that will ultimately lead to sin or even lead to laziness. But use that as an empowerment to pursue what it is that God has for you with peace, not with restlessness, knowing that ultimately God has it in his hands and he will open up the doors that need to be open. All right, that's your Midweek 5 for this week. As usual, it was a little more than 5 minutes, but I hope it's an encouragement to you. And rest in Christ. Pursue what he has, though, with peace, knowing that God's got it. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next week for the Midweek 5.